in our book club for yet another exciting and what I'm sure will be an educating session today. Um, our experiment that started in January has evolved slowly but surely. First, connecting the unconnected with Ravi, then onward to February with Rama's Romance, and now we are engaging in innovation under ROM Shankar's baton, ably supported by Anu and Raja as reflectors for this session. We are also interestingly waiting for something special coming from Srinivas for April. So we'll hold you in suspense for a few more minutes. But in the meanwhile, let me ask Srinivas to get rolling. Over to you, Srinivas.
Yeah. Thanks, Milind. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't think we have Australians here, so it's only morning or evening. And in the month of March, we have 3 birthday members. Tanku is not here, but we are having Geeta and Gautam. So this is a birthday song for them.
Srinivas, we cannot hear the song yet. There.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Happy birthday, Geeta and Gautam.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you very much.
Thank you,
Have
guys.
a wonderful life.
That's pretty cool.
Happy birthday, guys. Happy birthday.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Geeta.
It was very nice.
Thanks.
Happy birthday.
Now, by the request of the members, we are going to announce the books to be read 2 months in advance, so that gives enough time to procure books and read them at leisure. So these are the book choices to be read in the current month, March, and next month, April, for May session. And this time, ROM is Abdul Rashid, and he felt that South America is neglected on the literary sense, while there are a lot of books are coming out since 60s. So he has given us 3 options, and each of them he believes that are excellent books, and then they reflect the culture and ethos of Latin America. So this will be shared with you as usual, and you can form your own groups and start reading them for May session. So which means that we are not having a session in the month of April. So there is a good news and better news. The good news is that you're going to get a break, so that you don't get overwhelmed by reading and reflecting and things like that, and we'll go back. But the better news is that Milind and me, we have been talking about it, and we said we need to have a lit fest. And today, the literary festival is one of the very well organized event in India. I don't know about US and other countries, but it is being held in almost all the cities, and these events are highly patronized, and a lot of others come and talk in person. So we said, why don't we bring those elements to our book club? So we are going to have an online Lit Fest. Lit Fest is typically for 3 days to 5 days, but obviously we cannot have a back-to-back. So our Lit Fest will be for 3 Saturdays. So starting from 30th March and 6th April and 13th April, we are going to have 3 well-known good authors coming and speaking to us for 15-20 minutes on totally different genres, so that there's no repetition, and also we get a flavor of different genres. So 3 genres Milind and myself have shortlisted, and fortunately we are able to get good authors to agree to come and then talk to us. And again, even the best news is that you don't have to do anything, and you have to just be there for at least 15 to 20 minutes to listen to them. And if you have time, that you can have another 15-20 minutes to interact with them. That is the overall plan. So the topics that we're going to talk about is achievement on 30th March, and management on 6th April, and culture on 13th April. I'll be sending the details after this meeting. So we have speakers. PC Bala will be talking to us on 30th. And he is a very interesting personality. He is a chartered accountant and entrepreneur. Successful business he ran, and he sold it for some undisclosed amount. And now in his 50s, he wants to do something what interests him in life. But he has been also an author, and he also is very close friend of Rajnikant. So he wrote books on Rajnikant, not the stardom, superstardom, which we all know, but more on the his personality, his outlook to the life, positivity, and there are a lot of stellar qualities in terms of his ethics and so on. So I think he's going to talk on that. On 6th April, we have 2 eminent people. Most of you may be knowing about them. Gopal of Lever and Tata's fame, and Rishi of, again, from the Lever fame. Very, very senior people. Rishi happens to be our very senior from IMC, is the 3rd batch. So they just published a book on learn from the past, manage the present, and prepare for the future. But they are actually focused not what Trivi talks about, which is more technical for most of us. They are going to talk about the software aspects. And both of them will be present on 6th to talk to us on the software side of the management, how we can look at the future. On 13th April, we have very interesting personality. Ram Krishnamani is a chartered accountant, and he was a CFO before he decided to change the gears and then became an IT SAP specialist and then migrated to US. And he was very, very successful in that also. A passion for Indian culture. So for last 10 years, he's been spending minimum 1 to 2 months in India, and he was traveling all the temples. He must have visited hundreds and hundreds of temples, and most of them from Tamil Nadu, but he went to Khajuraho, and then he went to other temples also to see temple architecture. So he started his journey with the temple architecture, and he discovered that there's a lot of dance expression was visible on the temples. So he studied on that, and then he figured that dance is a part of the overall expression, and he started right from the root. So he's really gone into the research mode, and last 4-5 years he's been intensely working on this aspect of dance. So he started from the Nataraja, and then he's gone down, and he brought out an epitome of a tome of a book, and which can be a Bible for this particular aspect. So he is going to speak on Bharatanatyam and cultural aspects on 13. So my request to all of you is to please make it convenient to
No, thank you so much, Srinivas. You've successfully organized all of these speakers. One of them, many of you might remember, Gopal Krishnan, who was at Levers and then at a very senior level with the Tatas. He had come in the context of another book that he wrote with Ranjan Banerjee. So it's nice to have him again. When he heard from Rishi that they have been invited to our book club, he was ready immediately because he had enjoyed his first earlier session. So it's all good news, and I'm looking forward to this Lit Fest.
Very nice
It should
idea.
be very exciting.
Nice idea.
Yes.
Very nice idea.
Yeah.
Who is in touch with Rishi?
I am in touch.
Srinivas got in touch with him.
Very nice. Very nice.
He'll be coming to Bombay also in the month of May, Isha.
Yeah.
I think we'll meet him that time in person.
So I'm looking forward to this 3-session festival, and I hope all of you will join us. Today we have another special session in our experimental phase. And given that our Reader of the Month, Shankar, is from the Silicon Valley area, not too surprisingly, he's chosen as his theme innovation. And he picked 3 really very good books, as you will see. The Everything Store by Brad Stone, Idea Factory by John Gertner, and Empires of Light by Jill Jones, which didn't get much of a subscription, but he will talk about it briefly during his overview. So with those few words, I'm going to hand it over to Shankar to give us an overview of the theme and these books, and then we'll move on to discussing Everything Store first, followed by the Idea Factory.
Before that, Milind, there's a curtain raiser for the innovation. So now we'll get into the topic just for a minute.
Okay.
An invention is an idea. It's an idea that's useful. Somebody thinks of something. It gives us a new device, a new approach, a new technique. And that new idea suddenly changes the world.
They were published in Scientific American each and every week throughout the late 19th century. Lists of new inventions and announcements of patents recently awarded.
Well, Americans as a whole were thinking of themselves as a nation of inventors. Some joke that a young American man would feel guilty going to his grave without having won a patent of his very own. This was something that everybody aspired to do.
To W.B. Austin of New York for his chimney ventilator. To Joseph B. Underwood of North Carolina for a newfangled coffee roaster. To John Senn of Illinois for his improved remedy for hog cholera.
The newspapers, you see editorials about how it was the patent office now that represented American greatness, not the capital. And I think that beautifully captures the way in which America thought about itself, this growing industrial power on the verge of transforming the world.
Americans often felt a little inferior to Europeans. They didn't have the great universities. They didn't have the great arts and literature tradition. In the late 19th century, Americans said, this is what we do. We are inventors.
Very nice. That's a good prelude before we hand over the session to Shankar. So go ahead, Shankar, with your overview for today.
Yeah, thank you, Yanks, and thank you, Milind. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And so I wrote a little essay, and I'd like to share that with you. And I've used more examples from the Empires of Light book rather than the Amazon book and the Idea Factory book, because I think those will be well covered by Anu and Hebar, respectively. So innovation, and we're going to talk about innovation. I want to make 4 points that I hope will be memorable to all of you and will help you in terms of understanding innovation, and particularly this notion of an innovation platform. So as you know, innovation is the bedrock of economic growth, prosperity, and development. And therefore, studying innovation deepens our understanding of the long-term impact of these new technologies. And I've provided you in the email a quote from Kathy Wood of ARK Invest, which talks about these, 14 technologies comprising 5 innovation platforms, which result in 40% annual growth rate in stock valuation. So even if you're not of a technology mind, but you understand technology platforms, this is a very important part of wealth creation and prosperity. And the 3 books that I selected, deliberately covered 3 different periods in history. As you can see from the table below, the 1870s, the great kind of American industrialization where the electricity grid enabled this amazing growth of innovation. Then, the 1930s, and the post-war period, where electronics, semiconductors and communication technologies created this boom, and that was the platform. And then, the internet from the 1990s onwards has created this amazing boom, and that's kind of the reason that I chose the 3 books. Now, the second point I want to make is innovators are different to entrepreneurs. There are many innovators who are not entrepreneurs. If you read the book on electricity, one of the most famous innovators was Michael Faraday. But Faraday wasn't a businessman. Faraday was not an entrepreneur. But Thomas Edison was not only an innovator and an inventor, but also an entrepreneur who saw the potential of creating new business and creating wealth based on the electricity platform. And notice Jeff Bezos, who we'll talk about, is not a techie, like Jensen Huang, but his innovation is around the business model. Business model, in turn, was based on the capabilities and the potential of the internet platform. And of course, Bezos was and still remains a really driven entrepreneur. So there's this whole notion of the entrepreneur leveraging the platform. Now let's talk about the platform. So innovation platforms like the electricity grid, the internet, mobile communications, what's special about them is they have the ability to spawn and foster multiple businesses, which in turn opens up new markets with new products and new business models. And therefore, innovation platforms accelerate economic growth. So notice electricity in itself is a nice invention, but it's not an innovation platform. There was lots of electricity even starting from 1700, but the generation and distribution of electricity, i.e. the electrical grid, is a platform. And as a result of the grid, electricity became ubiquitous, electricity became affordable, and it opened up a large market for new products. Products like motors and dynamos, which in turn created new products like electrical appliances and lathes and milling machines. And therefore, the electricity grid, with the entrepreneurs, powered industrialization of America. Without the internet platform, imagine like the giant Amazon corporation that we know today would not exist. The internet platform allowed Google and others to innovate on the internet search platform. And the search platform, in turn, spawned new businesses in advertising technology and marketing technology. So there's a kind of internet platform and then sub-platforms. Now, without the internet and mobile, a product like Google Maps doesn't exist. And a company like Uber or DoorDash or Zomato doesn't exist either. So innovation platforms allows developers and innovators and entrepreneurs to create new technologies, new products, and new markets. And of course, for what I'm doing now personally, it's likely, but not yet proven, that generative AI is a new innovation platform. So now, here's the interesting thing. Competition accelerates innovation. Competition between companies, competition between entrepreneurs almost invariably accelerates innovation. In fact, this competition improves the innovation platform. Notice, just because Lycos and Alta Vista and Google were all competing to make a better search engine, it improved the search innovation platform, which in turn drew in more innovators and became like a virtuous cycle. And this always happens. There was intense rivalry between Thomas Edison, and it's legendary rivalry between Edison and Tesla plus George Westinghouse. You know, they were like always going at each other. And it's beautifully documented in the book. And as a result, the electricity grid became better, it became safer, and became a platform for American industrialization. During the early days of Amazon, Bezos developed this intense rivalry and dislike of the Reggio brothers who ran Barnes and Noble, the largest bookstore chain. You know, he had the slogan, well, you know, we're the biggest bookstore in the world. And you know, the Barnes and Noble guys were really mad. And this rivalry improved the internet because they would keep innovating as an e-commerce platform. And that in turn helped drive innovations in Amazon's business model, Amazon's sales, marketing, sourcing, and distribution. And this improved internet platform helped create and grow thousands of new companies and new businesses. Likewise, the rivalry between the GSM camp, which was Nokia and Ericsson, and the CDMA camp, which was Qualcomm and Apple and others, helped to develop the mobile platform and create new ecosystems, apps, and businesses. So competition accelerates platform. And then lastly, government, interestingly, fosters innovation. And this is beautifully brought out in the Idea Factory. During World War II and Cold War, DARPA and NASA played a critical role in fostering innovation. And since AT&T was a monopoly and subject to antitrust regulation, the US government was able to use AT&T Bell Labs as a cradle for innovation. And their innovations such as radar and diodes helped to win the war, not only in Europe and Japan, but also in space. But more importantly, Bell Labs innovations created new platforms such as the internet, semiconductors, mobile and cell phone communications, all created by Bell Labs innovations.
He is fine in his position.
And the role of the US government was very systematic and very strategic during the Depression and Cold War years. And government has continued to foster innovation via IARPA, the NSF, the NIH, although I guess the jury is out on, you know, the new initiatives like the CHIPS Act and the National AI, NAIRR, which is kind of within the NSF for AI. Notice Taiwan, Germany, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, China, and even Soviet Union have all pursued various forms of government-sponsored innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's possible that we could be seeing a new similar innovation platform being created and fostered by the Indian government. The Digital Public Infrastructure Stack, which is Aadhaar, UPI, Bhashini, GSTN, ONDC, is attracting developers, companies, and entrepreneurs. And there's some evidence now that new businesses are being created based on this DPI platform. And notice it took entrepreneurs like Nilekani, Raj Mashruwala, Vivek Raghavan, working with the Indian government to create Aadhaar and you know, sort of set this whole platform on its feet. I think by itself, the government may not have made it happen, but now that they've, you know, helped to create it, it's got momentum. So those are the 4 points. You know, innovation basically creates this platform for new businesses, and there's a difference between entrepreneurs and innovators. Competition accelerates that innovation. Government fosters that innovation. And there's a difference between an innovation itself and an innovation platform on which new businesses, entrepreneurs, and prosperity can be created. So let's kind of listen to what Raja and Anu Nagarajan have come up with, and hopefully we can have a really good discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Shankar. I think you covered innovation in your wide sweep right from the 19th century onwards, which has been a fascinating journey. Just like Rama started our journey of romance with Kalidas in the 3rd or 4th century, and with the Abhijnan Shakuntalam. So very nice perspective, and thank you for that overview. So with that, we are going to move on to the Everything Store. And Anu is going to represent the group that read the Everything Store. So I'm all ears to listen to your reflection, Anu. Go ahead.
Thanks, Milind. So it's really hard to follow that lovely introduction given by Shankar. So I'm going to try. So the book that some of us read about Amazon and Jeff Bezos deals with how the company and its founder relentlessly pursued. Oh, the first slide. This is not yet here. Yanks.
Go back. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Previous slide.
This is the first slide, Anu.
First slide. I want the first slide.
This is
I'm
the
still
first
on the
slide.
first slide. The Everything Store? No.
Okay. Let me pull out yours.
Oh, you don't
Me
have
and
the first slide? I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, it is the first slide is the one that just has the title of the book. Okay, that's okay. Don't worry about it. And so yeah, so what I thought was that's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Seriously, don't
Sorry
worry about it. No problem. So I just wanted to give it a kind of an intro as to why I was talking about disruptive innovation, and it kind of builds on Trivi's point, so it's fine. So basically, the idea was in the book they talk a couple of times about disruptive innovation, and now I'll go on to the next slide. And so I thought I'll just give a brief understanding of what it is that Christensen actually talks about in terms of disruptive innovation and why it is so popular in terms of both in business circles as well as in academia. So the way in which the whole concept came about in traditionally we thought of innovation as being either sustaining or incremental in nature, or it could be radical where all our everything is changed about the industry and the ecosystem. But then over time, Christensen noted that there was a different kind of innovation that was happening, which is given the same context, you found firms coming in which changed the way in which the industry actually worked. And so what happens was that incumbents tend to get quite complacent, and they keep targeting the higher end of the market. And so as they keep going higher and higher, the lower end of the market is not served. And so there's an opportunity for innovation in that area. And a very nice example is like if you take the Google productivity suite. When we think about Microsoft's productivity suite, who would have thought that there could be any competition just given the network effects that it has? And you come nowadays, you go to any of our schools, everyone is using only the Google suite, except I think in the finance world where you need to have the complex mechanisms for Excel. And how did they come about? How did they start it? By giving us very simplistic things. We did not need all the bells and whistles that are there in the Office productivity suite. So they kept charging us more and more. And so we started looking for an alternative as an everyday user who didn't need all those bells and whistles, right? So that's the way in which you think about disruptive innovation. And so you can either have disruptive innovation through, trying to go for the lower price and lower features, or you can have new markets where you're actually coming up with a new business model. So given that background, that's what I was trying to kind of show how Jeff Bezos, and when he was thinking about Amazon, he had both in mind. It was so interesting to see that the way he introduced the entire concept was singular focus on having the lowest price. So he was catering to those who could not afford to pay more. So very clear in his objective. And he knew that he couldn't do it the old way. So that's something that persisted throughout the book about how he just, kind of absolutely closed his eyes to the regular way of doing things and said, that doesn't have to be done that way. Of course, he carried it to quite an extreme in terms of taxes and everything else, but it's interesting. So next slide, please. Yes. Yes. Next slide.
Yeah, there you are, Anu. You can see the slide, right? Yeah.
Now it's now. Okay. Probably it's slow because I'm trying to use a hotspot. I'm not at home. So, okay. Thanks. So this is basically in what I had just explained about how, the incumbents generally start improving the product so much that becomes out of reach for the people who started using it. And then could you click it again, please? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so then the entrant comes in at a lower price and actually captures most of the mainstream market till the incumbents in the industry no longer are relevant. Okay, so next slide, please. So now we come to the book itself, and I don't know if you guys had as much trouble as I did with basically getting through the book, not because it was not interesting. It was too interesting. I just didn't want to skip, and it was a very, very dense book. And it took forever to finish it, but I learned so much in the process. So I thought I'd start with the Jefferson, or I think it was on page 12. And he says, if you want to get to the truth of what makes us different, he talks about, Jeff Bezos talks to the author about it. He says, it's this: we are genuinely customer-centric, we are genuinely long-term oriented, and we genuinely like to invent. So I thought I'd pick out a few things that, kind of reflect these aspects of Amazon, especially in the context of what we talked about in terms of innovation, about how he was so different in the way he talks about it. Because there are many firms that talk about being customer-centric. And so thanks, Yanks. So, what Amazon has done has been quite extraordinary. But I'd also like at the same time for input from you, my fellow book club members, if there is anything that you thought was striking in the book or your personal experience, because I feel like my husband and my daughter support Amazon single-handedly. So please continue to buy the stock. You'll do well. Because we've never had a bad experience with Amazon, especially in terms of returns. So it's just customer-centric to the nth extent, and their only aim seems to be, how can we make it work for the customer? So he starts off really early with this concept with, having a chair in the conference room to represent the customer's perspective. All the new ideas that he always begin with, what does the customer need and how will the customer benefit from it? I thought it was really unique. And this again comes back to the customer centricity. He made his employees pay for parking and food. And one might think, hey, how is that customer centric? But then he doesn't want the customer to pay more, right? Anything that you're going to give, finance tells you and accounting tells you that if you're going to have these overheads, that has to be paid for by somebody, and ultimately it's going to be paid for by the customer. So it basically make them pay for everything, which is very unusual on the West Coast. I understand, haven't been there, but I've heard about it. And then, of course, lowest price at any cost. So I think today's news or yesterday's news talked about the charge that he's making the sellers pay at this time. It's very interesting. All the updates on Amazon are all about the new inquiries and the lawsuits that the FTC is filing against the company. So it's going to be interesting to see the next few years. But generally, the customers have benefited a lot from the low price that he offers. Next point, please.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the second thing is about the long-term orientation. I think it's really hard, and I think Trivi brought this up as well about how we, when we think about innovation, we kind of think about, whether a person is thinking about a new idea, or are they thinking about a business? And then if you're thinking about a business, what kind of perspective are you looking at? Are you looking at just, a quick exit? Or are you looking at basically making it something that sustains and lives on well past you, right? And the kinds of investments, the kind of ideas that Jeff Bezos was basically fostering in Amazon reflects this long-term orientation. He had this firm belief, despite all odds, that that it is going to succeed, and you have to make these big bets. So the investment in the warehouses, I mean, one would think it's crazy to have such large warehouses, right? Without, the commensurate amount of business. Of course, it all worked out later as he, started offering fulfillment for others, right? But then investment in IT infrastructure that laid the foundation for AWS, the huge bet on Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Think about it, thousands of books being delivered the same day for not charging them more for it, and a 40% discount on the book itself. But what a great way to get your name out, right? Next one, please. So, and then the last one was about, the Bezos talked about the fact that Amazon likes to invent. So, throughout the book, you found many instances about how they believed passionately in doing something new and doing something different, but at all costs being at something that is convenient for the customer and cheap, right? So the search that within the book, search as a competitor to Google didn't work out too much. The response to the students at HBS kind of, hey, incumbents don't understand, we know better kind of thing, and then the way in which he thought about Kindle and, having the book in your hand, and the design, of course, he really was off base on that. But just the thought process was wonderful to read in the book. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I have 3 questions that, dominated my mind at the end of this. First one, of course, there's one chapter that actually talks about Amazon's path, are they mercenary or missionary? And they like to think of themselves as missionary. But I felt so uncomfortable about many of the things that they did. For example, the way in which it wasn't a straightforward deal about, the book industry, the worst of knives, Zappos, diapers, the way they threaten and, kind of make it inevitable that those people have to do what Amazon says. I maybe I've been in academia too long, but it just seems to be so ruthless. Yeah, so I don't know if I can talk about them as being missionary. I think maybe missionary on path for customers, but not so much to the rest of the world. Yeah, and then the next one, the next question. Yeah, so it basically is disruption only possible when you have a visionary, brilliant, and obsessive leader? I mean, I don't know if I came away with not thinking of him as much of a human being, didn't have too many characteristics that I would like to emulate. But he's much more successful monetarily than I am. So I guess that's why he is where he is. So yeah, is it possible? So because he talks about Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, you guys probably have dealt with a lot of very, very successful visionary people. Are they all this abrasive? I just don't know if you can be very successful And then the last question I have is, what is the future? What is the future for Amazon? Now that Bezos is no longer the head, can Andy Jassy be as ruthless as Bezos was in his decisions? Single-minded, focused. It's very hard to be that way. And Jeff himself talked about the fact that he had more to lose than anybody else. So that was the big concern. Now you have, the Flip app, which allows you to shop very, very differently. My students talk about it. TikTok, of course, they're taking off on shopping. We have Shein, Temu. So there's quite a lot of competition that's come up. So I wonder what lies ahead, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Thank you very much, Anu. That was a very thoughtful reflection. And I made sure I completed the book about an hour before I came to this session. And it was an excellent read over the last few weeks. What struck me very briefly was the steadfastness with which Jeff Bezos has pursued whatever has been his own set of goals for his organization. And the eccentricity, I think, parallels the eccentricity reflected in the book about Steve Jobs as well. So maybe it comes with the territory. I don't know. But we'll discuss it during the open session. So with that reflection on the Everything Store, let's move on to Raja, who's going to represent his group talking about the Idea Factory. Go ahead, Raja.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Milind and Srinivas. So, and Thrivi as well, for even suggesting this. So it's going to be a hard act to follow, Thrivi and Anu here, but I'm going to try as well. So let me start off with, very briefly, just trying to give you a perspective on where things landed, eventually with AT&T Corporation, right? And then I'll go back to the time frame of reference, for the Idea Factory here. So if you look at this, the chart on the left-hand side, that's AT&T Corporation around the time, that is the subject of this book, of course, and its glory days. But at the time in 1984 is when the breakup occurred as a result of the consent decree, resulting in what are known as the baby bells, which are essentially local exchange carriers that were providing local services. And so, AT&T continued with long distance at that point, but also continued with Bell Labs in its prior form. So all of those baby bells, it's ironic that when you look at this chart to see what happened when mobile communications ended up becoming a major competitor, suddenly the competition, the allowance for competition, which drove the breakup of AT&T, ended up causing some of these baby bells to look at the competition from mobile carriers and realize that they have to join forces themselves once again, and they reconsolidated. So if you look at the left-hand side of this chart, Southwestern Bell, which was a behemoth, local exchange carrier at that time, ended up acquiring the former AT&T Corporation and then assumed its own name. And then you had other baby bells there, Bell South, Ameritech, Pacific, Telesis, and all that consolidating into that fold to result in the current AT&T. Then you had Bell and Tlacknick, which became Verizon, combined forces with NYNEX, which is another entity, and then GTE Corporation, which is not part of the baby bells. It is not in what's known as a regional Bell operating carrier. It was an independent local exchange carrier, ILEC, combined forces with Verizon to become the current Verizon. And then you had, company like US West and, combining forces with Quest and CenturyLink to become today's company called Lumen Technologies. So kind of boils down to a smaller number of companies. So kind of a reverse direction that you would expect in any kind of competitive kind of situation. But that's because there's a completely disruptive innovation that occurred with mobile telecommunication and, national footprint for those kinds of services. On the right-hand side, what you see is kind of just a history of the Bell Labs. In its former form, AT&T Corporation, it was formed in 1925 until 1984. It was part of the old, monopoly AT&T Corporation. And then when the breakup happened, it continued the AT&T Corporation that remained, but until 1996 when it was acquired by Lucent Technologies. And that lasted until 2006. For various reasons, Lucent ended up, almost going bankrupt and was acquired by Alcatel. And Bell Labs continued with them at that point until 2016, when Nokia ended up, acquiring Alcatel-Lucent, and so that's where it resides at the moment, right? So with that as a background, what I want to focus on is the time on the right-hand table there. That's from 1925 to 1984, pretty much. I think it's, however, perhaps a little bit earlier than that end date that the focus of the book is about, right? So with that, let's go to the next slide. So Shankar offered, a great selection of books to discuss tonight. I was nominated to summarize group reflections on this book only because I worked in Bell Labs for a few years. So no other qualifications, by the way, right? So I wasn't there during the golden years, though, covered in this book. But I suppose the positive thing about it is it also means that I'm not old enough to have been there then. I joined Bell Labs during the initial years after the breakup of AT&T in 1984. Driven by a consent decree, the large monopolies split into so-called baby bells, which were themselves behemoths, one of which, Southwestern Bell, eventually acquired AT&T itself and assumed its name. I left Bell Labs before they were spun off into Lucent Technologies in 1996 to join one of the Bell companies, not necessarily a full baby bell, partial baby bell, if you will, just previously partially owned by AT&T until it became fully independent as part of the consent decree. But while I was with Bell Labs, though, even though it was after the focus of the golden years in this book, it appeared to me that the pride and production of innovation was still evident. There were still many significant innovations that won major awards and successes in the mid-80s to mid-90s before spin-off into Lucent. For example, TDMA, which is digital cellular telephone technology, Karmarkar's algorithm, which is in linear programming, innovation there. Laser cooling, which was from Stephen Chu, who later became the Secretary of Energy. He won the Nobel Prize for it. Commercial release of C++ programming language, development and implementation of the first transatlantic fiber optic cable, breakthrough with invention of DSL, which is a digital subscriber line, which facilitated the broadband era. So significant improvements, and of course, the famous Shor's algorithm for quantum factorization, which really, spawned an entirely new industry in terms of the potential for that and proof that some things are exponentially, or rather possible beyond the ability of classical computing to be able to tackle. So how did all of this happen? How did Bell Labs during this period become the hotbed of mind-blowing scientific discovery and innovation? Is there a recipe for this? If so, is it feasible to replicate? Here are the reflections of those who read the book and shared their thoughts combined with my own thoughts. So if we go to the next slide. So what is innovation after all? What does it mean? What does it create? As Maurice asked in the group forum, can a large company still be innovative? And I like Jack Morton's, who's one of the characters in the book, his definition of innovation, quote, not a simple action, but a total process of interrelated parts. It is not just the discovery of new phenomena, nor the development of a new product or manufacturing technique, nor the creation of a new market. Rather, the process is all these things acting together in an integrated way toward a common industrial goal. So I would personally add another ingredient to this recipe that is perhaps taken for granted within a monopoly, which is market adoption. An example of an innovative product, for example, that failed is Sony's Betamax, which is really considered to be the better technology and product in many ways than VHS, and satisfied all of the ingredients that Jack Morton talks about in the above recipe, but died in the face of lower adoption and therefore higher price. Bell Labs had the advantage of controlling this final ingredient. Their products were adopted in large scale by a mammoth monopoly that had the government's backing. Maurice asked, can there still be a route to monopoly through acquiesce to government supervision? My guess is that, it probably would be highly unlikely in today's environment, but it's up for discussion in this forum. Shankar suggested that the key learning is now how university academia combine with corporate to drive innovation fostered by the government. This combo has been replicated countless times, not just in USA. We see as an added ingredient into the innovation formula, but Shankar felt not in this book. If we go to the next slide. It does, though, get briefly mentioned in the book, but with a different take on the perspective. The author notes that venture firms are averse, understandably, to funding an entrepreneur seeking out new and fundamental knowledge without any way to predict the difficulty of obtaining new knowledge and without any tools to assess its market value. How could someone bet money on it? As a venture capitalist for Kleiner Perkins puts it, we don't fund science experiments. Perhaps this was the case, though, when the book was written, but we do have VCs now literally funding moonshots, right? Ventures, in the lunar space, or making big bets on what was previously considered to be fantasy Gen AI goals before the bet was recently realized in a huge way, or, for example, investing in new quantum computing technologies. In his later days in 1997, John Pierce, which is a core character in this book, himself was asking, what about the Bell Labs formula was it that was timeless? He thought it came down to four things: a technically competent management all the way to the top, which I think you can see in the case of NVIDIA, by the way, right? For sure. Researchers didn't have to raise funds. Research on a topic or system could be and was supported for years, and research could be terminated without damning the researcher. Few companies today, I feel, can satisfy all of these, but there are additional important factors that enabled and sustained the idea factory. For example, the ability to pinpoint the key skills needed, find the right people with those skills, and then get them to work together. There is no formula for doing this well or doing them as consistently as Bell Labs did. The leaders covered in the book had an eye for talent and genius. They used myriad ways to identify and attract the right people, including seeking referrals through their strong personal networks. But it is their eye for that genius that really enabled them to bring in the right people and get them to work together, even though there was fierce competition internally, within Bell Labs as well. So if we go to the next slide. So Maurice, prompted by Vivi's input, commented on the interesting difference between funding curiosity versus funding moonshots. That Bell Labs was created to eventually fund moonshots of global telecommunication, but many of the research projects along the way were funding the curiosity of a scientist with no direct path to the moonshot. I feel that these are often intrinsically linked. Funded moonshots tend to influence the nature and direction of curiosity. So Gautam asked if there are others like Bell Labs. There are, but perhaps none rising to the level of Bell Labs as an idea factory during those golden years. While there are several examples, I'll give you an example of one that I'm familiar with and that I'm currently part of. I'm part of IBM Research, within which I'm part of IBM Quantum, and that has a similar environment and long-time pedigree of important discoveries and inventions. IBM Research, for example, is considered today to be the largest industrial research organization in the world, with 12 labs on 6 continents, garnering 6 Nobel Prizes, 6 Turing Awards, many other prestigious awards, and generated more patents than any other business in each of 25 or so consecutive years. Inventions such as the floppy disk, hard disk drive, magnetic stripe card on the credit cards that you use, the relational database, the UPC code, Fortran language, dynamic random access memory, technology of laser eye surgery, ATM machines, PCs, smartphone, first smartphone, by the way, home of Deep Blue, which challenged in chess, and also the system that beat Jeopardy champions, and of course the computers and software that powered the successful Apollo missions and the space shuttle program. There were 4,000 people worked on the Apollo mission for the first, trip to the moon, and they created the computers and the technology and the software for that. So if we go to the next slide. So Shankar is himself at the very heart of an entity that has parlayed technological breakthroughs into massive commercial success. We're all witness to that happening right now. I think we're all privileged, to be seeing that. NVIDIA recently drove a massive $277 billion in market cap increase in just one day. To understand the scale of that fact, that's 20 times the market cap of Nokia as a whole, which includes today's Bell Labs. That's more than 2.3 times the entire market cap of today's AT&T, and more than 1.6 times the entire market cap of IBM. Talk about converting innovation into commercial success. If you want to look at that, you need to look no further than Shankar and NVIDIA. Perhaps Shankar can reveal and share some insights on the R&D environment within NVIDIA that creates such explosive success. So hopefully looking forward to some insights from you on that, Shankar. So when I was with Bell Labs, did the culture stay the same? Someone asked that question, or change from what is described in the book. On the face of it, during what I call the transition phase between split in 1984 to when it was spun off into Lucent, there were small groups and some individuals who were allowed to work on anything for a certain percentage of their time. The rest of the company, however, was required to be more focused on near-term impact creation and ROI. The relative proportion of these two segments, though, people doing their own thing and people focused on near-term projects, was probably not too different from what was described by John Pierce. He said, you see, out of 14 people in the Bell Laboratories, and this is in those days, he once remarked, only one is in the research department. And that's because pursuing an idea takes, I presume, 14 times as much effort as having the idea. The difference in the later Bell Labs environment was that the larger segment of staff were pursuing their own lines of business with near-term goals. A telling point, as per Gautam, is that research work at Bell Labs in early days was to develop products with 30 to 40-year lifetimes. In the 80s and 90s, should be 90s there, the focus had shifted to 4 to 5 years. Go to the next slide.
Raja, can
Yeah.
you wrap up in the next couple of minutes, please?
Yeah, let me do that. So let me, in fact, jump to what Ravi provide some interesting perspectives. He was blown away by what had been accomplished in Bell Labs and their most significant R&D efforts, making today's digital age possible, probably unmatched by any other industrial facility. He said what made this possible is being a very profitable corporation in a protected environment, monopoly, both vertically and horizontally integrated, allowed the parent to invest big bucks in fundamental research with a very long time horizon. But he feels that there's probably much more to the Bell magic than that. 2 aha moments for him was that it was pretty much a tenet in the era that we all worked in, that fiercely competitive markets and innovation are strongly correlated. However, Bell Labs story has made him rethink that assumption. And then the second one is that he was fascinated by the discussion about what was more important in achieving breakthrough innovation, individual genius and serendipity, or institutionalized collaboration. Ravi's take is that the leaders at Bell Labs, his favorite is Mervyn Kelly, were brilliant in that they understood both to be important, and they built an organization and culture that fostered both. Go to the next slide. I'll kind of summarize on this with a few other points that you can see here. But to close, besides being a fascinating read, there's so much in this book about the practices at Bell Labs during that period that we can learn from, take away, and apply. We may never be able to replicate the whole, but we can benefit immensely from replicating the parts of Bell Labs. So thank you all.
Great. Raja, that was a very comprehensive perspective, and also you incorporated the discussion within your group very well in your entire presentation. So thank you for that comprehensive reflection. It just wakes me up to the fact that technology is exploding to such an extent that I feel like we are falling behind rapidly, trying to keep up with so much that's going on. Perhaps anticipating what Anu said about the everything store, she wanted another opinion by someone who had read the book. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes literally, because having finished reading the book, I penned down my thoughts. So the first thing I thought is, when you want to be a builder and pioneering entrepreneur, you have to not just have the vision, but also the grit and determination to stick to it no matter what, until it becomes reality. And I thought Jeff Bezos is such a builder and pioneering entrepreneur, and Amazon, true to its name, like the gigantic, awe-inspiring river, is the reality he has created with his imagination. A paragraph from the book that Brad Stone writes about the achievements. He says, in the bargain, he transformed a retailer into a technology company. AWS helped create thousands of internet startups. Larger companies could rent supercomputers in the cloud. And AWS in particular, with its original services like S3, Simple Storage Service, and EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, helped lift the tech industry from a prolonged post-dot-com melee, as he says in this really fascinating read. So all in all, I thought Brad Stone's book stands testimony and reads like a testimonial to Amazon's many achievements in spite of heavy odds, especially during the early years, and in spite of all the challenges that they continued to face. And I, of course, empathize with Anu's point of view that the way they dealt with some of these problems may be seen as not too human. Okay. So with that, we are going to throw the books open to discussion. And just a small suggestion that since we have two very good books, perhaps we should first spend time talking about the Everything Store, where people who read the book can talk about it and the rest of us will listen. And then we move on to the Idea Factory. Again, people who've read Idea Factory talk about it and the rest of us listen. And that way we can use the rest of our time. So whoever wants to begin with the Everything Store, whether you read it completely or not, go ahead. Yes, Suresh.
So one thing that Amazon is actually facing right now are a lot of, let's call it lawsuits against antitrust issues. So would it make sense to actually split Amazon into different units, just the way AT&T, the Bell Labs, the AT&T company was split? Because that's one of the things that the FTC chairman, Lina Khan, she's written a paper while she was at Yale, how to split Amazon specifically, and they're going after Amazon.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Any reactions to that? Shankar, you want to say something?
No, such breakups have always been counterproductive. But right now, I think that government, is perceived as being very important, and the trade war. So there's a possibility it could happen. Although they tried to break up Microsoft, right? There was a lot of effort in the 1990s and 2000 early to break up Microsoft, but fortunately that doesn't happen. And you can see, I think the world is
trying with Google as well, right?
Correct. They're trying with Google. We'll see, whether Lina Khan is successful or not. But in general, look what happened to AT&T. They broke it all up, and then all of a sudden, mobile happened, and ultimately, all the companies.
But to the ultimate consumer, it benefited because it got down the telephone rates.
But I would argue that those telephone rates would have come down anyway with cell phone communication.
You don't know that.
We don't know for sure, but to me, it seems kind of like likely.
Well, but for those who are interested in Amazon, that Yale review article by Lina Khan is really worth reading. It's very light reading, easier than reading the Bradstone book, and it's so comprehensive, makes a very good case. And this was written when she was in law school, I think. It's in the Yale Law Journal from a while back. And but she's making a very strong case. And then now we're getting a lot of information about, because Amazon doesn't actually break down all the its financials the way a traditional company would.
Tactics have been rapacious, for sure. Rapacious. I mean, that's I'll read it. I should read Lina Khan's article.
Yeah, I do have a comment to make, a question. The question is, how soon are we going to potentially see disruption of Amazon as well, right? And the same disruptive forces. Tell you about an experience that I'm actually, privileged to be in an area that's being served by drone delivery with a company called Wing Aviation, which is a Google company working in concert with Walmart, right, and Walgreens. And so I'm able to order, through an app, items from Walmart, and it gets delivered to me, in a range of 10 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how many backlogged orders they have to deliver. And they're constantly increasing the capacity now and increasing the service area. But it's incredible. There's no minimum, there's no shipping charge. It costs them a pittance to deliver by drone. And this drone comes in. Just today I ordered some items, and there were 2 drones that came and delivered to me right in my front yard. It drops the thing, and I can share this video, with the group sometime, but it just comes and drops the item right in my driveway, right, within 10 minutes. So it creates a potential for the future, for Walmart to potentially turn the tables on Amazon unless they begin to adopt the same technology. So it's, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. And I think the point that Anu made towards the very end, to see now that Jeff Bezos is not in charge, to see whether or not, the same kind of drive that he has brought to the business will continue, or whether these kinds of disruptive forces will potentially create an issue for Amazon.
Very nice.
It was very nice discussion. I just want to add one more thing that, during COVID, it was life-saving. Amazon kept everybody going. Like you could order anything, and you still got your stuff done, and it was really very, very helpful. And besides all the stuff going on, Amazon does provide very good service to consumers. They come and set up everything for you. They have services where they can do it in timely fashion, and I hope that it continues to be successful.
So the concern, Saida, is right now it is true, right? But once they establish the monopoly and all competition is basically eroded, then as Trivi was pointing out earlier about innovation and competition, once they don't have any competition because they've basically taken care of it.
But Anu, just imagine that their competitor is Walmart, which is like giant, right? So I think there's no way that you could argue that Amazon is a monopoly in consumer retail.
No, not in retail.
No, e-commerce.
Not in retail to a large extent.
Not in total retail, but in e-commerce, they are the biggest.
Yes.
Sure.
And so sellers are able to say that, no, we're not able to sell anything if we're not on Amazon. We have to work with them, right? So what is that but monopoly power?
Right. Not just that, in the Amazon marketplace, if I want to go onto Amazon marketplace with my product, they'll actually look at how it sells and copy it and create another product and lower the price. So that's what you have separate companies, they cannot do that.
Right.
Right.
Very true. Yes, Anjali, go ahead.
And that's what taking off from what Shankar had said about the Indian digital public infrastructure. He mentioned ONDC, and that's creating a public platform. The government is creating a public platform, which is in a way a competitor to Amazon, because sellers can list on ONDC and buyers can buy on ONDC without paying the 30% surcharge that Amazon charges. And they have badges and they're copying all the other good stuff that Amazon does. So I think the biggest point that I took away from the Idea Laboratory was that the competition, as Shankar had highlighted, and the interactive nature of the stuff inside Bell Labs created fabulous, fabulous opportunities for innovation, and the competition outside spurred it. So maybe that's the witch's brew that is needed. And if Amazon does have Walmart on the one side and they have ONDC on the other, and drones have to compete with Blinkit in other market contexts, maybe there's, it's good for the customer. Maybe good or not good for the company, but maybe good for the customer, which is what Bezos says is customer centricity, which is what you need to do. Though I think it's very strange that he never paid for the employees' food and
Parking.
Shankar, how do you explain? I'd love to hear from you as well. So, whatever.
Yeah, just quickly before Shankar replies, I think from having read the book, Jeff Bezos picked that up from Walmart. The austerity in terms of cost and cutting down cost at any level.
Plus, he's always been tight-fisted. He doesn't contribute too much philanthropically, as much as even his wife does more.
Correct. Yeah.
They all are like that, Steve Jobs, Jensen, Bezos.
Well, not Bill Gates. Not Bill Gates.
Not Bill Gates now. You see, what changed was later. But if at the beginning, they are super tight-fisted, okay? Scott McNeely as well. Because when you start a company, Deva, it's life and death. Every cent counts. That's why Bezos makes his own desk. I remember going with Jensen in 27F on a flight to Beijing. right? And I was in 31B, which is the exit row. And he said he's fine, sitting in he's a short Chinese guy, so he's okay in the middle seat, and they all are very frugal, all of them. And you notice Rockefeller himself or the early Birlas compared to the later Birlas, frugality is kind of almost core to entrepreneurship. Those of you who've started your own companies know this, right?
Yeah. And they've seen the tough times, I think, and that sort of instills that frugality into them. Yeah. Well, that was a good discussion on the everything store. So we can move on to the Idea Factory. For those of you who've read Idea Factory, go ahead. Whoever wants to opine. There were more people reading the Idea Factory. Go ahead.
Yeah. One observation that I noticed in reading the book is that several of the people mentioned, all the scientists and engineers in the book, were born in the Midwest and grew up in the Midwest and then moved over to the East. Take Mervyn Kelly, for example. He was born in Kansas, grew up in Kansas. Then Claude Shannon was from Michigan. John Pierce, who grew up in Iowa and then California. So that's kind of interesting.
And nowadays this happens, they move from the Midwest to California and Seattle, right?
Yeah.
or from India, right? Or China.
Robert Shockley moved to California. He grew up in California and moved to California.
Even in India, they move from Aurangabad to Bombay and Delhi. The same pattern continues in India. Look at the last 100 unicorns. Look at these boys. Right? They are from Rohtak and Aurangabad. It's not the Bombay and Delhi kids who are doing this. That's the reality.
So notice they are hungrier, right? They have less, that's the key point, right? They come from, like a lot of those Bell Labs people were basically farmers' kids, right? They grew up on a farm.
They're all like that. I mean, in India also met a young boy from Rohtak and somebody was telling him, ये सब Bombay, Delhi वाले Portugal जा रहे हैं, इधर जा रहे हैं, Dubai जा रहे हैं. He says, अरे साला सबको जाना चाहिए ना, हमारे और जगह होगा. So they're very clear. I mean, like the small town boys are very clear. This is our India now. Bugger off, you guys. Keep complaining. Go to Dubai, go to Portugal, go wherever the hell you want. This is our India. There's a whole new paradigm.
Ishan, I'm reminded of an article Anjali wrote many years ago after the terrorist attacks on the Taj, where she pointed out that a lot of the recruits who are very devoted to the organization and who dedicated their lives in many of their cases all came from smaller cities and towns. They were not Bombay residents. So
even our batchmates have more
searching for talent can be everywhere.
We are the boys hitting it at the moment, absolutely. Out of the park, like the Americans say. But it shows. I same thing. Even when I was reading the Bradstone wala book, look where people are from, where they come from. I mean, amazing. Bezos also with his grandfather's farm, ye bana raha hai, wo bana raha hai. It's not what you think, as to where he should be from. I mean,
and that was the common factor between Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos.
Absolutely.
Both were adopted kids. Am I right? Not
adopted
brought up
kids,
by their
grandparents influence. Obama. I mean, look at Obama. I mean,
Ravi has got a question. All right, wants to talk on something.
So I just wanted to pick up on a conversation that Raja brought in the room. And I think Trivi sort of brought it in as well. And two of his conditions for what he called breakthrough or platforms was one, competition, and the other was government support or funding. And I was sort of fascinated in the book to read that probably, at least the reflection of the Idea Factory, was that the second was probably more important than the first in fostering truly breakthrough innovation. To quote from the book, apparently there was a study done in 2008 about where innovations come from. And that survey revealed that 77 out of 88 of US truly breakthrough innovations, I don't know how they classified that, were on a result of government support or funding, right? And I think that was an interesting insight for me personally, which is, I think, what Raja referred to, is that we grew up in a place where we believe competition is the largest driver. And the book seems to suggest yes, but maybe more for incremental innovation, but for truly breakthrough platform kind innovation, maybe some form of collaboration, especially with governments, was essential. So I thought that was an interesting insight.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Raja.
and notice, we are all kind of capitalist and entrepreneurship oriented, and we kind of forget, just like I dismissed Lina Khan, right? That, government is a source of many of these things, including, by the way, the India stack, and, Korean capitalism, Japanese renewal, German, despite the kind of terrible history, all of it, there's a big role that government plays, especially enlightened administrators. Notice, the NASA guy, right? Notice that, people move from the lab into Washington, D.C., right? Or people like Nilekani and then, Mashruwala came from entrepreneurship and volunteered time with the government to create this, staff, right? So that is a kind of a thing that we should all keep in mind,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
so
I
I
hadn't
think,
thought
you know,
of that
to,
enough till I read that book. That was interesting.
Yeah.
I was wondering what your thought was when in the context of the innovation platform and the role that you guys were talking about, Ravi, you as well, about the role of government in the electric car industry and how it's thriving in China. So what is that, a platform, or is it just is it a mandate? What would you say?
So can I just give you my thought about India, because I have a marginal understanding of this. I sit on the board of a company that's in electric two-wheelers. And I think Shankar made the very important point. What you need is enlightened government policy and intervention. I would say, and it is my personal opinion at the moment, unlike China, India's policy with regard to electrification is totally unenlightened. It is vague, it is ambiguous, it has no consistency, it sort of yo-yos from year to year. And I think in my personal view is currently detrimental. But I agree with you to the broader point, the fact that China's market is switching diametrically to electric has completely to do with government policy and government support and what they're doing. Unfortunately, that's not the case in my personal view in India at the moment.
And so notice in the US, sorry.
Gautam?
Sorry, I was asking Crips, is that BYD? Build your dreams?
Yeah. No, that's
I
the
think,
car, right?
So I think the background, in my view, and I think there are many keener China observers, I think China at some stage realized that if they're going to dominate the automotive industry, they have to promote a completely new technology. They realized in the ICE engines they'll never be able to do it. And I think sustainability and all of that had to do. But, at the end of the day, cleaning up cities is okay, but 60% of China's sort of electricity is still probably coal-fired. So I think in the sum, we don't know how much sustainability is actually going on. But to dominate the automotive industry, what they needed was a new platform. And I think they have single-handedly, in my view, sort of encouraged this and sponsored this. But I'm sure there are much.
I mean, these guys from the Communist Party, there are a lot of them who are technocrats. Others who are like just politicians, like Amit Shah type, this manage the crowd type of thing. But like Chi Lin, who's the architect of the high performance computing strategy, which created all the supercomputers, he's like a real engineer's engineer. I mean, he's very well respected. And he has come up with the whole, 862 policy and so on to create these, amazing infrastructure for innovation, high performance computing centers, like we have in America and India. They are one of the kind of pre-requirements for innovation.
So Trivi, since I have you and other techies on this group, something is intriguing me last 3 days. Google and all these guys are having a pissing contest with Zomato, with Naukri, with Shadi.com. And Bichu and all have been lobbying for India to create its own search within India stack. Is that possible? Does that make sense, or is it just nationalism and
I mean,
egoism?
search may be a solved problem, rather than, but what if ONDC happens, right? ONDC is kind of almost fundamental because it helps with the recommender and the knowledge graph, which is how search monetizes, right?
ONDC
So that's a beautiful thing.
Post-election, they've gone slow now, but they're pushing everybody. Banks, Unilever, we are investing in for RBI. So ONDC is the next big drive. Dhakka is going to happen. Abhi election ho raha hai. By June, between June and December, there will be a whole new ONDC which will come in India.
And imagine if all retailers follow ONDC, right?
Yeah.
Then it democratizes it. Anybody can type in, and
Well,
search and act.
Can I interrupt to say Gautam has been raising his hand for a while, so let's listen to him.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
No,
Gautam.
I was just thinking, since we are talking about the India situation, I was just thinking, one of the things I understood in the Idea Factory is that Bell Labs did their work on 3 platforms. One platform was their scientific basic research. The second platform was utilizing elements of that into developmental research leading to products. And the third was actual implementation by engineers into products that would have a lifespan of 30, 40 years to begin with, etc., but lesser in later times. In the Indian context, we see so much and we talk so much about digitization and what we are able to do today, with the Aadhaar, now Blinkit and things like that. It's fascinating. But I wonder, after independence, we had organizations like PIFR. We had organizations like TISS. We had DARs. We had in Hyderabad the DRDOs, the DRDLs, etc. How did we never get into scientific research? We in that era, we were complete followers. I mean, we did nothing that was innovative of our own. Why? What is the reason? Can you guys throw some light on that?
My quick reaction is, and others can add their opinions. I get the feeling that it had to have a very strong stimulus. For example, for India to create an atomic weapon, it took pressure from Big Brother China, which had atomic weapons, and we knew Pakistan was on its way to making these weapons. So that spurred a lot of action on that front. Or later when Dr. Abdul Kalam took over missile technology in India, he brought together 50 different DRDOs, which we thought were, very moderate in their capabilities. But indigenously, he was able to develop a lot of this technology and scientific base. So I see that some strong motivation leads to an impetus for scientific or technological breakthroughs. That's just my take on it. But
And Milind, if I can just build on that, I mean, there is this fascinating TV serial, Gautam, you may have seen, it's been quite popular, called The Rocket Boys. That refers to the story that Milind is referring to about the start of our nuclear program and our space exploration or our missile program. And it's fascinating to see, at that time when India was hard pressed to provide basic needs, was it the right thing to spend so much of the budget on fundamental research? And there is a scene from that sort of serial that I remember that talks about a debate within the cabinet to say, is that the right focus? And I can imagine some of those forces. But I would say in the early days, and particularly at the time when Nehru and sort of immediately thereafter, there was a fair degree of focus on fundamental research. Maybe not breakthrough research, but at least focusing on things that in the longer term would then. I think over time it is diminished. I think with the India stack coming back, hopefully we will see that revert. But I agree with you, for a large section between, we were too focused on the short term.
Yeah. Anjali, go ahead.
So this is from the Bell Labs, from the book, which said that, do you focus on the fundamental research or do you focus on solving a problem? And so maybe what India did was to focus on solving the problems. If you look at agriculture, they did look at productivity and they did look at focusing on solving the problem of food. And they looked at solving the problem of milk, and they looked at solving, so maybe they looked at solving those problems rather than the fundamental research. And in very facetiously, but we did a case study on ISRO, and there were some conspiracy theories that it took an Abdul Kalam to come, but before that, all the leaders were killed off. So I don't know how true that is. I didn't go into it because it wasn't relevant. But the conspiracy theory was that people who actually had the caliber of an Abdul Kalam earlier didn't really live.
Yeah.
And so was there some, but this is a friendly.
There is a lot of controversy around how Dr. Bhabha killed in an aircraft accident, or Vikram Sarabhai in Kerala, how he died. There is a lot of controversy around those. So it's not totally unfounded that, they may not have died natural deaths.
But Shankar, let's hear from you as well. Bring it together.
Yeah.
Okay, Shankar, I think Raja mentioned it during his presentation and Ajay wanted it. The research culture within NVIDIA. Can you talk about it a little bit?
So it's very interesting in NVIDIA. We have rough numbers, 28,000 employees. Please don't quote these, in public forum. But
Can I switch off the video recording?
It's okay. It's fine, but
switch it off. No harm. Switch it off.
Yeah, switch it off.
Digital trail, don't leave. Not required.